Right now, it's time for our first guest. This is a guy that you out there have emailed us an awful lot about, saying you'd really like to have him on the show, and we have got him for you. Richard Dawkins is his name. Arguably the world's most famous atheist. I don't know how you would test for that, but maybe we'll ask him. And you know about religion, right? You obviously know how powerful in this day and age, with Christian, Jew, Muslim, Buddhist, Star Trek, Leafs Nation, Ultimate Frisbee, whatever your thing is, it's the force in this world. I don't know if Ultimate Frisbee is technically a religion, right? The other two maybe. Look, religion runs the White House, you know that, or at least it does. They claim that it does. George Bush, an evangelical Christian. You're Prime Minister of Canada. You guys elected an evangelical Christian. He clearly runs both countries here. You hear about the committed Christian that Tony Blair is in the United Kingdom. And you hear moderate Islam, you hear radical Islam, you hear that religion unites, you hear that religion divides. And for some people, it just kind of makes them antsy. Because it seems like you can't actually criticize it without having a lobby after you. You will often hear people on television say, they're attacking religion. No one's attacking religion. They criticize religion, absolutely, but believe me, the people who are very religious tend to be the ones that are in control. And that's why it's so interesting that Richard Dawkins, not so shy about criticizing religion. He's got the stones to have a book called The God Delusion. All right? To him, the Bible is fiction, faith is a virus, and God is no different from the tooth fairy. Perhaps you agree, perhaps that pisses you off. Stick around for the conversation. Richard will join us in just a moment, but first, here's his bio. Richard Dawkins is an anti-holy warrior. He's a man on an intellectual crusade to tear down the foundations that religious beliefs are built on. His arguments, and he's got lots of them, lean heavily on Darwin's theory of evolution, and it is no surprise since Dawkins spent decades studying animal behavior and evolutionary biology. Now, he's a prolific writer of books and essays, and he's best known for his work on religion. New York Times bestseller, The God Delusion, is a no-holds-barred attack on what Dawkins sees as the absolute idiocy of religious belief. He called creationism a, quote, preposterous, mind-shrinking falsehood. And here is how he's described the Judeo-Christian God.
A vindictive, bloodthirsty ethnic cleanser, a misogynistic, homophobic, racist, infanticidal, genocidal, filicidal, pestilential, megalomaniacal, sadomasochistic, capriciously malevolent bully.
You know, it's those kind of controversial statements that sets Dawkins apart from other more cautious atheists. He argues that faith, of any faith, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, does not deserve respect. He says they're ideas like any other and should be scrutinized and attacked just the same.
The mysteries that we don't know, and I hope one day we shall know them, are far more profound, far more interesting, far more uplifting than anything that you'll find in the Bible or any other of the world's holy books.
And here he is, Richard Dawkins. Nice to see you. And how are you today? You know, before we start, and I think this is something that you don't hear a lot about, and just to be clear for people, the book is called The God Delusion, but it isn't just about the Judeo-Christian God. I think, and you go to links in the beginning of this book to talk about how it's the term that encompasses anything. So whichever version of a God or deity you believe in, monotheistic or polytheistic, whatever, you're talking about all of them, right? Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Nice to see you. So, right off the bat, what's wrong with, in your opinion, with believing in a God, regardless of who the God is?
I think it's false. I think that it's a matter of belief without evidence, and as a scientist and as an educator, I like the idea that we believe things because there's evidence. There's such a lot of evidence available now at the beginning of the 21st century that it's a real shame, it's a tragedy to base your life upon something for which there is no evidence and never was any evidence, when the real truth is so wonderful.
Well, I suspect that the argument they would make is that because it's absurd, that's why it's faith, right? That if it was evidentiary, you would require no faith and it would be fact, and that would be missing the point of religion.
That's absolutely right, but that's not a point in its favor, is it?
Well, you know, it's whatever gets you through the night, isn't it, ultimately?
Well, no, I mean, for me, what matters is the truth.
The scientific truth.
What other truth is there when we're talking about the universe, when we're talking about the nature of life? Of course, there are other sorts of truths like moral truths, or maybe they're not truths at all, but they're not scientific. But I think if we're talking about the universe, about what reality is, about what life is, then truth means scientific truth, yes.
You know, this book is ultimately, it's just a sort of a culmination of many of your years of work in this subject matter? Is this sort of the kind of your final offering? Go, listen, this is my God delusion book, and I want to move on from this.
I wouldn't like to necessarily commit myself to that, but I don't have any immediate plans for another religion book, no.
Why get into this?
Well, as I said, I do think it's a tragedy that when there is so much to know, for which there is such a lot of evidence, I do think it's a tragedy that people are being actively led astray by medieval or pre-medieval superstitions and Bronze Age myths written down more than 2,000 years ago. That is such a loss, and so that's one of the reasons for trying to fight against it.
Where do you think that came from? Because, I mean, you're right. The mysteries of this universe that we can see, the physical mystery, it is beautiful. I mean, and if this was all there was, this would be fine. But this has always been around. So where has it come from, do you think, in your opinion, this need to replace it?
The need for religion, do you mean?
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, everybody's always had a need to understand, I suppose, and before science was fully developed, they filled that need to understand with perhaps superstition or religion, other things like that. There's also a need for consolation, and religion probably gives consolation, or that's a bit of a mixed blessing. The fact that something's consoling, by the way, doesn't make it true, but nevertheless it probably is a human need. So it's easy enough to think of reasons why religion has persisted.
I mean, there's points in your book where you talk about the negative aspects of religion, what it's done to the world. And I saw you on Bill O'Reilly, and it was funny watching you and O'Reilly go back and forth. Who had the worst leaders, Christians or atheists?
Yes.
And it seemed to me that was almost missing the point.
I think that is missing the point. I think, I mean, there have been some simply appalling people in the world, from Henry VIII and Genghis Khan to Hitler and Stalin, and some of them have been religious and some of them have not. I don't think we should, I think you're right, it's missing the point to sort of tot up the number of wicked people who've been religious and the number who haven't. The question is, does religious faith, blind faith in the absence of evidence, does that predispose you to do evil things which you wouldn't otherwise do?
Does blind faith, is it a negative? Does it have to be a negative thing?
It might incidentally happen to be positive, but the fact that it's blind means that you have no particular reason to think it's positive, and therefore I think that in general the idea of blind faith, the very idea of blindness, is negative.
Well, maybe that's the wrong word, blind faith. Maybe it's just faith.
Yes, I mean, I use the word blind because it is in the absence of evidence. If it was in the presence of evidence, then you wouldn't call it faith. You wouldn't need faith if it was something. I think you made that point yourself.
Well, I guess when I was going through your book and reading it, you kind of, and again, I've grown up at home, I've seen a lot of Christian people in my life, and you look at, and none of them are running the world, right? None of them are leading crusades, but it provides meaning in their life, and I just thought, hey, you know what, whatever.
Well, that's a very nice sort of laid-back point of view.
I'd like to think so.
Yeah. And in a way, that's right. If it, people say, well, if it's right for you, if it's true for you, then it's true for you. I think there's something more absolute about truth than that, and I care about truth. I don't mean I wish to impose it. I mean, if people really don't want to learn about what's really true, then far be it from me to force it on them. But I want to give them the opportunity. I don't want children to be brought up sheltered from the truth by a wall of separation from the truth, which is deliberately erected by tradition, by authority in their particular culture.
Is there a misunderstanding, or moreover, has there been miscommunication about the number of atheists that perhaps exist? You always hear about it's Christian nations, and yeah. I know fewer and fewer Christians.
I agree with you. I think that it is a bit of a misconception. Certainly, I mean, in Britain, there are, even the polls show that there are a lot of atheists. In Sweden, even more, in France a lot. In the United States, statistics suggest that there are about, 20 million atheists, which is more than most people realize, but it's still, 10% of the population, they're less than that. So I think that there are probably a lot more than are out of the closet. I think it's a bit like gays were in the 50 years ago. Where we know, obviously, there were a lot more than ever admitted it. Mm-hmm. And I think there are a lot more atheists than admit it. And I think we should try to change that. And I think that we need a consciousness-raising exercise.
Although I will say this, I believe the gay pride parade will be much more interesting than the atheist pride parade.
Well, yeah. I think we could dispute that.
Yeah, you certainly could. I mean, you've been running with this a long time. This is certainly your book in terms of popularity. You are not the only one. Harris, Christopher Hitchens. Like, there seems to be a rise now of writings about this subject, about atheism, in an unapologetic way.
Yes.
Is it gaining more momentum, or is it just that it is salacious and so it is fun for people to talk about it?
I think it's gaining momentum. It wasn't a deliberate conspiracy or collusion. I mean, none of us
sat in a room together,
right? I suspect it's pretty accidental. I'm not sure that there was a great sort of, moment of unconscious, collective unconscious or something. I think it's pretty much of an accident. But it is fortuitous and fortunate that we do have these books, and really quite a lot of them, and I expect there'll be more now. I think it is, as somebody said, changing the national conversation in various countries in the world. And I think that people are that maybe we're going to approach a tipping point where it will suddenly become respectable in North America to be an atheist as it is, say, in Sweden.
You know how important tonality is? When I was reading this book, I thought, wow, this guy is going to town. And you've heard the criticisms that you're an arrogant atheist, all of those sorts of things. When you look back at the way you approached it, was it the right way?
I don't think it's actually as outspoken as it sounds. I think the reason it sounds outspoken is that it's about religion. And you just don't criticize religion. Yeah. Why don't you? Because you don't. And so if you use language which in any other context, like politics or football or something, would be thought pretty mild, if you use it in the context of religion, it suddenly sounds strident and shrill.
And you can see how bad your soccer team is. You can't actually see how your religion works,
yes.
right?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's funny though, because when I was reading it and I was going through your approach, I mean, I always thought if you ever influence the way somebody votes, if you're a political lobby group in any way, shape, or form, then you deserve the criticism. I don't care if you're a think tank or a church or whatever, but you raise this interesting point in your book about the absence of lobby groups on behalf of atheists and how powerful lobby groups have become politically, and in fact that may be part of the reason. Could there be a time when there would actually be a movement of people who kind of went, because there's 1 billion Christians in the world, there's 1 billion Muslims, and there are 4 billion people who are neither, yet those 4 billion people have to live by the rules of the other 2 billion. And I wonder if there's a time when the other 4 billion are going to go, yeah, you know what, enough.
I hope that. I mean, I'm not a great politician, I wouldn't be very good at it, but I think it is about time our voice was heard, yes.
Do you get this, like, when you started writing with this decades ago, did you ever get the feeling that in 2007, did you think religion would be gone by then? You know, the enlightenment that came, they called the enlightenment?
Probably did, actually, yes. And I think, I mean, we may be just in the middle of a sort of blip. In fact, I think we're coming down the other side. There was a blip in the Bush years, and look where that got us. And I think we're going down the other side now.
But whoever is going to run in America is going to have to be a Christian. Like, I mean, they made us think about Kennedy because Catholic wasn't Christian enough.
Yes, for the moment, that's true. But maybe we can change that too. I mean, it is beyond belief that every single member of the United States Senate, United States Congress is religious. Of course they're not. I mean, at least some of them are intelligent and educated. There's got to be some there.
That might go to some of the tone I was talking about earlier, the arrogant atheist tone.
You read that as saying that if you're intelligent and educated, you've got to be atheist.
You meant that.
You don't have to read it like that. You can say that statistically, in any population of intelligent and educated people, a substantial percentage of them are going to be atheists. And yet zero, but not quite zero, one came out a couple of months ago.
Deepak Chopra was on our show, and on our show he really wanted to challenge you to a debate about the afterlife.
I've had a debate with him on television. It's a television program which I made for Channel 4. It's coming out next month, I think, but maybe July. And it's called The Enemies of Reason. And I've got an interview with him on that.
Are both of you the enemies of reason, or?
Well, it's my program, so he's the enemy.
Absolutely. It is called The God Delusion. I know there will be a whole bunch of people who will never pick up your book, and they will criticize you anyway. If you agree or disagree with what he says, you should probably read his book.
They'll be quite surprised if they pick it up.
There you go.
Yeah.
Good to see you, Richard. Thanks for coming.
Thank you very much.
Richard Dawkins, everybody. The God Delusion is the name of his book. When the hour returns, we'll get into this.